Hey everyone, welcome to In Focus. I'm Adam. On this week's episode, Joe and I are going to be discussing all things related to the business of photography. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Hi everyone, I'm Adam. Welcome to In Focus with Adam Goldberg Photography and Joseph Roybal Photography. And on this week's episode, we are talking about the business of photography. So Joe, my friend, how you doing?
Hey, good, man. Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited for this week's episode just because these are the nuts and the bolts of photography outside of taking a picture.
Yeah.
How you been
Yeah, these
doing?
are the things that you actually need to have a successful business as a photographer.
Right.
So
Yeah. So yeah, I'm doing good. I'm glad that, it's fun to connect. It's always good to see you every pretty much Sunday when we film. Today's
yeah,
Sunday, right?
today is Sunday, and I actually had a shoot yesterday. It was pretty fun. I was at Chick-fil-A
For the shoot.
for the shoot. The shoot was at
Nice.
Chick-fil-A, so that
Well,
was
that's
kind of
perfect
fun.
too.
I did not get any food, which was a little disappointing. I'm not gonna lie, but some shoots
Yeah.
you win and some you lose, and that was a win with a loss for the lack of food. I'm a fan of
Well,
Chick-fil-A.
right. For everyone out there, Adam's not allowed to have Chick-fil-A. He's got to maintain that figure.
Thanks, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. So,
Yeah.
all right, well, let's dive into the business of photography now that we've talked about some of my eating habits. We're going to talk about kind of like we said, all the things that you need to kind of build a business. And my photography journey as a full-time photographer started about 5 years ago, but it really began before that. Um, I had a number of corporate jobs and was fortunate to travel the world, and I photographed the places that I was visiting for those jobs. So I was taking pictures of the hotels, I was taking pictures of the landscapes, the cities, kind of everything that I was doing. And I kind of had a nice passion for it, and I enjoyed it. And Joe, you've kind of been along for some of that journey. Joe and I actually met shooting in the Tetons, if I remember correctly, at about 5 a.m. for sunrise. Um,
Yeah.
so my photography journey has kind of taken a winding path, and about 5 years ago, I did kind of make the leap into doing photography full time, as I was at the point where this was something I wanted to do full time. I wanted to try and make a living doing it. And like I said, I'd enjoyed taking pictures of the places and the hotels that I was staying at. And so that was kind of where I decided to focus. My niche was on the real estate, architectural side of photography.
Right.
Joe,
Yeah.
your landscape. So kind of how did your landscape adventure journey start?
Well, and I love the way that you say that we met in the Tetons. Whenever anyone asked me, like yesterday, some friends said, "Well, how'd you meet this guy?" And I just was like, "Well, I met him in a field in Wyoming."
It was
Standing there.
dark. There was no one
It
else
was
there.
dark, and he was next to me, and he was using his headlamp, and I was just like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And then come to find out, he lived, just down the road from me here in Denver, which was super random. But but yeah, Adam, like you said, you got into this, and you're kind of, and I think like the big key here, and like we'll probably talk on that or touch on that, or now we might, is that I find that everyone always asks like, hey, how do you get into photography? How do you start making money from it? And it's not one of these things that you just pick up one day. And as a lot of people know, you don't just start making money doing it. And so then there's that question of like, how do you like roll yourself from like you having I was gonna say 401k, but you having the business, like the job,
Yeah.
and then going from that to then like just being like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm good enough now to, or good enough in the sense of like income to move over into that full-time bit. And so I guess there's there's an author, David Duchovny. He's got this book and he talks about it, and he talks about it like doing it like via the back door approach.
Okay.
Like keep your day job, work on coming in through the back door, no comedian ever just got up on the stage and just started being funny right off the bat and then made it to where they didn't have to like work their day job.
Yeah.
And so, for me, it was the same kind of similar thing in that I was living overseas. I had been living overseas for about 5 years, and I was all into that, travel, landscape photography, or actually I should say travel photography, food, people, that bit. And then it
Mhm.
was coming back to the States, couldn't really do that. And so it was then having to figure out what to do. But then I was also always working in restaurants. And so I was doing that juggle, what I was just saying. It was that juggle of how do I do this? How do I do that? Make money. And it's just that I think, ultimately it's that slow phase out that you probably, went towards as well.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a great description. We'll put the name of that book in the show notes. That way everyone else can find it and link to it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of other photographers I've talked to as well, like you said, it's kind of this slow process, and you kind of have to get to the point where you're willing to make that jump, make that leap, whatever description you want to use for it, to, all right, this is a passion, it's a hobby, it's something I enjoy, but my primary income is something else over there. And
Right.
so photography is really fun. And then to make that switch into doing it full time, and we had this conversation when I was about to go full time photography, was, is it going to take some of the fun out of photography? And I think the
Oh
answer
yeah,
is probably yeah, it does, because
it does.
now there's all this pressure to make money.
Well, it's like my parents tell me all the time, like a job is a job, like
Yeah.
ultimately at the end of the day. And when you think about that, when you have your day job and then you do photography on the side, you're purely photographing for the fun of it. And
Hmm.
then when you kind of quit your day job and you come into this bit, then you're kind of like, well, now it's real. Now stuff has gotten really real. And like you are doing amazingly with this. You have the family, a family, couple kids, and it's like, so for you, just to say, it's like, for when you made that transition over, it was a big deal. and
Yeah.
and, and it always is for everyone, but just saying, like, there's those realities that you have to really consider.
Yeah, and I think that's, everybody's situation is going to be different, and so making sure that you understand all of the pieces, and we're going to talk through some of them here,
Yeah.
of what goes into kind of making that leap into photography, and kind of keeping your business going. And I think the first thing is building up that client base, and some of that you can do before you go full time. um, so I would kind of say this is kind of the number one thing, is build up that client base. Talk to everyone you know, whether you're going to be shooting real estate, which is one of the areas that I kind of first got into. Find out who everyone you know that might be a real estate agent or might know someone who's a real estate agent. If you want to shoot weddings, well, find out who's getting married. um I
Yeah.
mean, just simple things like that. And figure out what you want your niche to be, I think, as you're making that leap too. So network within your niche. So for me, it was architecture, photography. And so I went to happy hours here in Atlanta for the architecture group in Atlanta. So it was architects and their vendors. So obviously I'm a vendor. And so going to those and just chatting with folks is a great way to get to know them. And especially at a happy hour, I mean, over a couple of beers, what's a better way to get to know someone and get comfortable with them? So that way they're like, all right, I'll go check out your work. He's cool to work with, or he seems like he would be cool to work with because we had a couple of beers together. Why not?
Yeah,
Let's shoot together.
totally. Totally. And like you hit a good point there. I feel that, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking like, well, how do I find, they're watching this and they're thinking, how do I find my niche, or how do I figure that out? And you had it in an email between the two of us this last week. And I thought it was great that you said it. It's like, ultimately the only way you can find out what you want to do is to try pretty much everything.
Hmm.
And you're going to then figure out what you don't want to do, and let that be your saving grace and your guiding force.
Yeah.
Because if you're like no kids, then don't do kids. But if you do kids and you're like, man, I kind of like this, like, or dogs, whatever, like, you're never going to know until you just try it all. And then it's that, like, we talked about in the previous, I think last week, we talked about, watching tutorials and getting ideas. And so it's that you can also, once you start figuring out what you like, then you can also start working at getting better within that genre, because photography, it's just the umbrella, if you will. And then your architecture, and you do landscapes, and you do travel. And then I do some architecture, but not like Adam. And then I do pretty much purely landscapes. And, and so then, but that's only been as a result of, distilling it down, which we're getting to that here. But yeah, it's like this like idea of, you got to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, figuring out what you want to do, and then, like I said, figuring out that networking piece to it is
Yeah,
is
sorry, the
such, is such
networking.
a key. Um, and
Yeah.
so many things just come from conversations. Just having
Yes.
conversations with folks, and you just never know where it might lead.
You never do. Absolutely. Um, what when you were talking about this, I thought back to, there's a JW Marriott here in Denver that is known, and obviously before right now, this, the pandemic that we're in, but it's right, there's a restaurant right below it, and it's like pretty much the number one location for businessmen and women to come to Denver to, like, for work. And I never really did it, but I always jokingly said I should, and it would be great. It's that, just going and having a business card at places like that and just spreading your name around,
Yeah.
like finding those places. And it's just that whole thing, like, almost like an untargeted approach, but just really kind of putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big, I think, takeaway here is just don't be afraid to talk to people.
Yeah, I mean, and talk to people, and understand it's going to take some time. I mean, you can't expect to have a successful business within a month or two, or you're going to go to one happy hour and meet all of these people and have tons of clients. I think the average photography business takes like 5 years or something before it's like really in and successful, and you've kind of made it, and you're
Yeah.
kind of established. I think it's kind of like that 5 year mark. I don't know. I feel like I read that somewhere. I don't remember what. But the reason I'm saying it is just to tell folks, like, it's going to take some time, and you might kind of have some bumps in the roads in 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
a year, 2 years, 3 years, before you can kind of be like, yeah, I'm making it, and I'm doing it well. And yeah, I don't really have to worry about maybe going back and doing something else.
Right. But, at the end of the day, if you have to, you have to. And then, here Adam and I are both in that 5 year mark. And then this situation, crisis, if you will, in the world hits. And so it's kind of thrown it's like that 5 year and then my mark. And then now it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I was just feeling good.
Yeah, I was excited for 2020, and now not
Yeah.
quite as
Yeah.
excited for
I
2020.
know. I was like, I graduated from like New York strips and I was eating rib steak last year. Now I've got to go back to skirt steak.
As long as you're not
Sorry.
doing the ramen, you're good, right?
Yeah,
Ramen
no.
for 2 meals a day.
Yeah,
So,
just joking. So anyway, yes. So building a client base, like as we were talking about, is massive. And I think that's like one massive thing to think about. Takeaway is like, just talk to anyone and everyone, figure out what you like, what you don't like, and then really just going after that market.
yeah. And I think then tying into that, I think would be our next item, which is the website. So you've talked to all these people, you got to have somewhere to send them. And that website is going to be their first impression of your professional work. And
Right.
so having a solid website is so important.
It's critical. And like your brand, like because your website is the face of you and it's your
Mm-hmm.
brand. And so, your website kind of ties in, and we'll do both here probably, but like we will, but the website and your branding, like not just a logo, but like your branding is like your image, the way your photos look. It's
Yeah.
just everything about the backdrop, our logo we chose in focus, and we chose the colorway, we chose everything. It's just the branding. It's everything that people see right off the bat.
And it's so important. And I think some questions that folks might have with the website and kind of creating that branding as well. How do I do it right off the bat? And it's hard, and you're probably going to have to spend some money to have someone create a logo. And if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, building that professional website, and that can cost money. So there's the
Totally.
financial aspect of it. And then the other piece I think that folks might have questions on is, well, how do I get images for my website if I'm not shooting what I want to shoot? And that can be a challenge, but it's something that you kind of have to just slowly work on. And we can certainly talk about that more. I mean, how did you kind of start to get some images for your website as you were kind of looking to go full time?
Well, yeah, for me, it's like, okay, landscapes, I just was thinking, how can I get some of the best landscapes I can get and not, when I was really new in the business and like new at almost taking pictures, it was tough. So I was just trying to get photos. Um, and then, and then trying to learn editing at the same time and trying to do all these things at the same, it's always this way though. It never seems to like not be everything all at once.
Mm-hmm.
It's always everything all at once. But so, getting those photos. And then I think it'd be good for us to just talk about in a second so we don't forget like the website companies maybe that we utilize too, just to throw that in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just doing that and then thinking, okay, do I want to have a landscapes gallery? Do I want to have a black and whites gallery? Do I want to have a panoramic gallery? And then when I'm out taking pictures, I was thinking, okay, do I want to have like a little series here? So it's just trying to roll that. And then it just grows over time. But I don't know. What do you think for
It
you?
does. Yeah, I mean, so I think on the architectural real estate side, it can be in some ways more challenging, especially for interiors. I mean, like I said, landscapes, anybody can go to a place and take pictures. So I think,
Right.
there can just be a time aspect to getting that portfolio built up. But if you actually have subjects where you need to, like a wedding, or in my case, architectural photographers, well, how do you get that portfolio of images? And it's a process, and it's kind of painful for people to think about, but it's like sometimes you have to do that initial work for free. And just because you're offering the work for free the first time, a lot of clients know that it's not going to be free forever. If you email them and say, I'm just starting out, your house, your office space, whatever you designed as an architect is amazing. I'd like to come photograph it. I'll give you the images free of charge. And they say yes. They know that if they like the images and they want to work with you again, and then in the future, that you might charge them something for it. So, and I also would almost say, go the free route up first, as opposed to
Right.
like significantly discounting your pricing. And we can get into pricing certainly a little bit more, but um, you might have to do some work for free, and that's easier to do if you're not doing it full time because you have other sources of income. So building up that portfolio by
Yeah.
finding talented people of spaces in the architectural world that you like, or if you want to start shooting weddings and engagement sessions, go just take pictures, find some couples and ask them if you can take some pictures and give them the photos for free. And that's how you kind of build up your portfolio, so that way you do have a really good set of images that
Right.
when you do go full time, it's like, yeah, this person can take these photos because they have the photos on their website.
Yep. Absolutely. One of the things that when I was getting into all this, just thinking back, I was thinking, as a lot of people probably do, weddings, just do weddings because they make money, and they do absolutely. Um, and in doing that, one of the ways I found, for those of you watching this and thinking about it, one of the ways I found that was a great way to get an incredible portfolio of wedding photos, is to second shoot a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Going at second shooting, because then you don't have the risk and responsibility of really, carrying the full load and the burden. And if you can find a photographer whom you love their style and love their work, and just seeing if, reaching out via email. And that's what I did. Found a couple guys, and one guy in particular, his work was amazing. And then I started doing some second shooting with him. And that spawned. But then in the end, I was like, I don't really feel like the wedding route. So,
I
you
think
know,
that's awesome. Cause I mean, you can do that in a lot of different fields. You can assist in
just
architectural
like yours.
photography.
Yeah,
I mean, you can assist on workshops on the landscape. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way. Again, that goes back to networking too. So you're building your portfolio, you're building your network. A lot of these things tie in pretty closely together.
they do. And at the end of the day, it's all of this comes down to, a conversation, like it via email,
Yeah.
sitting down with someone, next to someone, talking to people. That's like, like one of the big points here. Yeah,
Sure.
because yours is hard to get those images because you can't really get into an architectural space specifically. And, you know,
Yeah. I mean, it's a process. And like I said, it's going through, and sometimes you might have to do some shoots for free or, get,
right.
find ways to get into spaces so that way you can get the shots you need for your portfolio. But I did want to circle back before finishing up on talking about the website. Um, I hired someone to make my website. I had used one of the services. I don't remember which one it was, in all honesty, for a while. And I just wanted a different look to mine. And I
Hmm.
think this goes back again to branding and how you want everything to look. And so I actually went and hired somebody. It's Alter Endeavors. Again, I can put a link to them in the show notes here. Um, they did a great job with my website. I'm super happy with it. They still are helping me with some elements of the website on a regular basis. And for me, it was worth the investment after a couple of years of doing this full time to pay to have someone actually like really build that awesome website that had the look and feel that I wanted to, that you could customize that
Right.
maybe you can't do on some of these other sites.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's one thing, when we're thinking of like so you went that route because you were like, all right, I want to have this, I want to have this functionality. I'm also able and willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
And then, and there's a lot of people out there that are like, man, I've just got to get something up. And so there's a
Yeah.
lot of companies and I've worked with a couple, or I've worked with one in the past, being on a pro team forum, and I love them. And for like wedding photographers, portrait photographers that need to sell a lot of volume, Zenfolio and like SmugMug, those two are just incredible for that,
Yep.
having those client galleries. And when I needed and wanted more flexibility, and I didn't exactly want to go the route of hiring someone, so I went the route of Wix, and I've been
Okay.
really happy with them. And I've had a lot of people tell me that, like, hey, you know what? Your website looks like you hired someone. And ultimately, it was that I would go to a lot of these websites that I was like, man, this is amazing. This is amazing. And I would just take notes on like what I wanted and the look and the feel, and thinking like, man, I'm landscapes, so I want my site to pop. I want my images to be the focus. I want it to be kind of rugged, clean, and like, yeah. And so I went down the path of like going Wix route, and I've really loved it, and it's not crazy expensive. And so
Yeah, I think yours looks awesome, and there's no way that I would think that that was a kind of stock site, like one of those, stock sites that you didn't actually hire someone out and pay a lot of money to. So I think it goes to show that there are options for folks on any
mhm,
budget based on what you're looking for. So you don't
yeah,
need to spend $5,000-$10,000 to hire someone to build a super custom, amazing website. You can get something very, very similar with a tons of functionality and the look that you want for a very reasonable price.
right, absolutely. Oh, all right. What's next?
What's next? Insurance. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because this is just not a fun subject. I don't think for anybody, but it's important. Get business insurance, figure out, talk to an accountant, a lawyer, whoever you need to, figure out if you should be an LLC or sole proprietor or whatever it needs to be as you start your business. So that way your business is separate from your personal, especially on a financial and legal standpoint. So that way, if someone sues your business, all of your personal stuff is safe. Again, we're not lawyers, we're not accountants, so we're not going to get into too much of that, but definitely talk to someone and figure out what is best for you in your situation. And then get insurance both for your business and for all of your equipment.
Right. Boom. I did watch a lot of Night Court growing up, and so I feel like I've got a good understanding of how this all works. But
Tell us more about how you spent your childhood, Joe.
so no, Adam's absolutely right. So like insurance, and and one thing here is I've had all of my gear stolen out of a rental car in San Francisco, and it was one of those bummer moments. And so this is like both I have my insurance covering my gear, so I have a policy for that. And if you make $1, and I've had, and you might, Adam, you might be able to tell me yes or no here, because I don't want to lead people wrong. But I'm with State Farm for my home. But the fact is that if I make $1 from my business, and if I have an LLC or an S corp, then they say like, well, then we can't cover you on like that side of your gear. So that has to be a separate policy.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it as a hobby, it's different. And so there's
Yes.
a big distinction here. So if
Yeah.
you're making any money, you've got to get your separate business policy that covers your gear, because it can't fall under your renters or your homeowners as easily.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, again, talk to your own insurance companies, talk to
Yeah.
a lawyer if you need to, get it figured out as you start making money or decide to go full time. But, getting, like I said, creating an LLC or a sole proprietorship, so that way your personal stuff's different than your business stuff, and then figuring out the insurance thing is important both for your gear and for the business, because like I said, it might not all be covered, and you never know what's going to happen at some point. And it's just, again, insurance, one of those better safe than sorry situations. Like you said, you never expect to get your stuff stolen from a car in San Francisco, and it
No,
happened.
it happens. Safety never takes a day off.
Yeah, it does not. That is true. All right, next I think is forms. Again, don't want to spend tons of time on it. We could probably do a whole episode on it, but email templates, forms, contracts, agreements that you're going to be sending out to your clients. It makes you look professional. It's, I think, an important thing as part of your branding as well. And it keeps things clean if there's ever a question from a client going forward about how they can use the photos, what the agreement was of the types of photos that you were going to take. It's better to have it. If anyone's interested, we can certainly share some of ours, at least generically, so that way you can kind of have an idea. Depends on how specific you want to be with what the forms that you're going to need for your business. And some places actually have forms that you can download as well. So there's lots of resources out there on the form side of things.
There's quite a bit. And Adam you were a great resource for me, and we've kind of pinged things back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Just, going forward with clients, and like, hey, how do you handle this? What do you have? Is this like a clause for that, etc.? And so, if you have friends in the industry or people you might know, utilize them as a resource too, to ping ideas. And ultimately here, like, don't be afraid to share your contracts with others,
Yeah.
your friends, etc. Like, or, because all you're doing is helping them, and they'll help you. And it's the best business practices you can do is just help each other out. And that's Adam helped me with some of his stuff, and it's been massively instrumental.
Yeah,
And
it's a small community, the photography community, so we like to share each other out. And so, forms and contracts and stuff like that, because it's nitty gritty. It's not fun to create a document from scratch around some of this stuff, and you don't know what to include. So
right.
it's good. And I mean, it's definitely saved me more than once. And I'll just give a quick example. And Joe, you know this, you've heard this one before. I was on a shoot, and it was an architectural shoot, and I took 10 photos for this client. And I delivered the 10 photos and got some feedback on it, because I always allow them to provide feedback on edits and stuff like that. And then after they provided the feedback, their boss got on the email chain and said, we were expecting 10,000 photos that we could look through. We wanted all of the raw files and all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was just able to say, well, the contract that you signed specifically said that I was going to provide you with 10 photos, and that you would have an opportunity to review my edits on those 10 photos. I would not share the raw files. And so obviously it was a disagreement, and my goal is always to make the clients happy, but I had it in writing in a signed document of what they had agreed to. So I had the upper hand in the final discussion of what we were going to end up doing to both me get my compensation for it and to try and make them happy. So that's where, just a quick example of why forms and agreements are so important, because it lays out exactly what you're going to do, what they're paying for, and what you're going to deliver.
Exactly. And Adam's going to be your resource here, people, for this bit. That's why I take pictures of mountains, because I, I, I don't want to deal with that as much. So for everyone watching, Adam's your man.
All right.
Forms, contracts.
Yeah, happy to talk more about that. I can do a whole episode on it. It might bore you and put you to sleep, but we can cross that bridge when the time comes. Yeah. Next up is pricing. How are you going to price yourself? This is a challenge, and it's going to depend, I think, on where you are based off of the market that you're in, the niche that you're in. There's so many factors to this.
Yes.
But just think about how you want to price yourself, I guess, is the short version of this. We can have a whole nother episode on pricing. You do a lot of different stuff as well in terms of selling prints and some of these other things than I do. So for me, it's more, how am I going to price myself for either do I want to charge hourly, half day, full day? Am I going to separate post-production out from on-time shooting? So it's a little bit more black and white in terms of how I price myself, but yours is certainly a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, and I just made a little note here so I wouldn't forget about it, but when I'm thinking of selling a print, pretty much industry standard, if you're not going after, limited editions or, artist proofs and like all these like really technical bits, if you're kind of thinking about, all right, if I just am taking a photo and someone wants to buy this, what do I sell it for? A general rule of thumb is, 2 to 3 times your production costs.
Okay.
Just in that realm. Another way to think about it is to figure out a pricing, like a per square inch cost. And to figure that out, go to some photographers' websites and look at their prices and do the math. And then you'll get an idea of how much they're charging per square inch. And that's a really, I think, fair, honest way to go about it. And then also be honest with yourself at where you think you should fall within that. So if someone's really, really good and they're 75 cents an inch on a photo, and you're just learning, like, you might not want to be 75 cents an inch, or just go, full out the gate and charge 80 cents and then see where it goes.
Yeah.
Like, really, there's no right or wrong, but that's one way in the landscape world that I've found that is a way to figure it out.
That's awesome. That's a great tip for folks.
So Adam's world, well, I guess wedding photographers, you can look those up, because that's becoming, and thank God we're getting into a world, Adam, when we started, I mean, you would know this too. And man, you could never find a wedding photographer's price anywhere. And so you didn't know if you should charge $1,500 or $10,000. You're like, how much do I charge? Yeah. And then clients were getting frustrated and hurt in ways too, because they would get bids all over the board.
Yeah.
So
I think this is one of the nice things about the internet, is that people want that upfront pricing a lot.
They do.
So for my real estate work, my pricing is on my webpage. For residential real estate, which I don't do quite as much as I used to, my pricing is on my website. So if a real estate agent wanted to hire me for a shoot, they could go to my website and learn my pricing. For the architectural work, it's not on there because it does vary a little bit based off of the client and what they need. So I don't want to have standard pricing on there. I do have pricing lists that I do send to my clients. Right. So they all know this is what I'm going to charge. There's no hidden fees. There's no questions what it's going to be. If they hire me for a full day, they know exactly what the cost is going to be based on what I'm going to deliver.
That's great.
So, I think that's a little piece that is good to know from a standpoint of how are you going to price yourself. Mm-hmm. Now gets into, well, you don't want to be too low, I would say, on the wedding, portrait, architectural, real estate side of things, because there's a point where someone will be like, well, why is this person so much less than everybody else? Is the
Right.
quality of their work not as good? So know what clients you are chasing. If you are
Mhm.
chasing kind of the higher end market, even if you're new, don't price yourself too low. If you're okay kind of chasing kind of the lower price, that doesn't mean less quality work, because you always still want to be putting your best quality work forward, because that's going to get you more clients and maybe higher paying clients. But just know where you're pricing yourself and how that represents your brand.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that's great. And that's, just made me think, like, almost kind of going back when you're thinking of clients, all this, social media today is a wonderful way to, like, if you're in that, even you, architectural world, but companies, hotels, wedding, brides, they find so many people now on social media. And so
Yeah.
that's one way too, to like build up a client base, is just to like have these great photos. But it just crossed my mind.
Yeah,
So
no, no, absolutely no. Thanks for throwing that in. That's a good
yeah.
thing.
So yeah, man, I think that's really good on the pricing aspect, and if people have questions, fire them in. We'll talk more about it.
Yeah. And again, the email address is infocusvideocast@gmail.com. We'll have that again at the end of the episode in the show notes. So yeah, shoot us a note. We're happy to answer any questions that you all have, or if there's topics you want us to dive into more on future episodes, we can definitely do that. And I'm guessing pricing is probably one that's going to come up, because you and I email back and forth a ton about pricing. Just, well, how should I price this? What should I do kind of with this? Because
Totally.
situations can be so different. So pricing is always a tough one, and we probably should dive into it in a little more detail in a different episode.
Totally. We could do that. All right. So now, what do you have in your bag?
What's in my bag? I am a Canon shooter. I have been since I was kind of, again, doing this as a hobby, long time ago. And
Yeah.
so I have the Canon 5D Mark IV is my workhorse camera. I love it. It's about 34 megapixels, somewhere in there. So kind of upper mid range, I would say, on the full frame DSLR front. Um, Lenses, I have a couple of the Canon tilt shift lenses. They're fantastic. I also have some extenders in there, because that gives me some extra versatility with the tilt shift lenses. If you're doing architectural photography, we could have a whole episode on tilt shift lenses and why they're so important
Yeah.
to
That could be
taking
awesome.
architectural photos. They're amazing. So if you're looking to get into architectural photography, tilt shift lenses are expensive, so you don't necessarily need them as your first lenses, and I would probably not recommend it unless you can afford it. My other stuff that's in my bag, my backup camera is the EOS R. So that is Canon's mirrorless 5D Mark IV equivalent. It is, again, a great camera. It is my backup right now because it only has one memory card. I like to have backup memory cards, and the 5D4 has 2 slots, whereas the EOS R only has 1. Other lenses are, I got a couple zoom lenses. I have the 1635 f2.8, which is another great workhorse lens from Canon that I have. Let's see. I think that's probably about it. I use a bunch of filters. I'm going to talk about filters and lights at another episode, but in terms of gear, that's kind of what I have
Okay.
on the architectural front. And then Joe, I'll turn it over to you for the landscape stuff. But I don't think you always need to be chasing the latest and greatest gear. It's so easy
No.
to spend money and always want to have the top of the line, the newest thing. Your clients probably aren't going to notice the difference. I know tons of architectural photographers who are just absolutely crushing it, and they're using stuff like the 5D Mark III, which came out almost 7-8 years ago,
Quite a
probably.
while back. Yeah.
And they're, that's their camera. They love it. It works for them. Again, it's a great workhorse. They're using it. Mike Kelly uses the 5DSR. If you don't know Mike Kelly, check out his work. He's one of the premier architectural photographers in the world. I'll put a link to his stuff in the show notes. use the 5DSR, that's probably about it. Again, a 5-6-year-old camera. It's tons of megapixels. It's a great camera. But it just goes to show that to take amazing photos, you don't necessarily need the latest and greatest things. So be specific, especially if you're starting out, with what to buy. So that way you don't overextend yourselves from a financial standpoint as you kind of build out your kit. It's something that you can build out over time to buy what you need as you can afford it. So that's in the architecture stuff. What's in your bag, buddy?
Well, now, as of just recently, it's all Sony stuff, but it's always been Nikon.
You took the plunge.
Always been Nikon. I took the plunge, and I like it. I will say that I'm still getting used to it. I kind of like the way that Nikons just work, and they're almost, like a Mac, if you will, like Canons are. It's like the buttons are the buttons. Yeah. You have a couple customizables. You don't forget it. Sony's to me are kind of almost like an Android phone in a way where you can do whatever the heck you want to do to it.
We're going to make some people really angry with this Mac, PC, Windows,
no, I mean,
Apple, Android.
I just had somebody ask me here a while back, like I was talking to these guys in Iceland, these older gentlemen. They're like, what do you think? What do you think about it and why? And I was just like, I don't know. And it just hit me then. I was like, well, I don't know. Nothing wrong with either one. And I love the Sony too, but it's just, I forget my buttons and I forget the things that I've done because it's just, you can customize every single button. And unless you kind of go through and make like a list of what you've done, it's kind of confusing. But currently Sony, I have the A7 III, the A7R III, and then just 3 lenses. I have the Sigma 14 to 24 2.8, the Sony 24-105, because that's an incredible range for basically almost everything, near to far. And then I have the 70 to 300, and that's honestly it. Like a couple little things here and there.
That's awesome.
So, but going to how that all came about and building it up, like you said, you don't have to have the latest and greatest. And there was a reason why I went for the 3 and the R3 instead of the R4. And that was just because I wanted to have specific features. I didn't want to have all those megapixels for several reasons. And ultimately, it comes down to budget a bit too. I was, like I buy a lot of gear off Craigslist. I built my entire kit up until now. Even when I was at Nikon, it was years and years and years of buying on Craigslist, making sure it was good quality gear, trying to find a good price, and then selling it for the same price I bought it for.
Nice. That's a big win right there.
It was a win. So just to say, like, Craigslist is amazing. Like, don't be afraid to use it. It's a great way to get into the stuff that you need without having to buy new. Like, you never really have to buy new.
Yeah, I mean, there's places like Lens Rentals and so many other places where you can buy some used gear, and there's some comfort level if you don't want to go Craigslist. They sell all of the gear that they rent out at some point, and so they'll let you know how good a quality it is. Like, is it like new? Is it new but has like a couple little dings, but the optical quality on it's great. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great tip for folks who are starting to build up their kit. Is not only do you not have to buy the latest and greatest, you don't have to buy it new.
Correct. Absolutely. That's it. I mean, pretty much like on the gear bit, just never feel like you got to chase it. Don't think that going Sony's going to get you better pictures, because I'm just saying, it's like that whole thing. Like, I went for it for just a smaller, kind of like you're going mirrorless slowly. It's like you're just waiting for like everything to kind of catch up. And I just really wanted a smaller setup, not necessarily lighter. I just wanted smaller, more compact. And then you mentioned earlier, Adam, and I wanted to hit on it real quick because that was a big thing with Nikon. And, everyone knows that, like, obviously, like the R Canon, the EOS R, and then Nikon's current Z line all have just one memory card slot. And, I know you mentioned you wanted 2. I've had a lot of people tell me, even going to, Mike's Camera, talking to them there, a lot of people are just like, hey, you know what? XQD cards on these new systems never fail. They're like fail proof. And I just would simply say, like, well, what happens the day that you're in the field, you're cold, and you go to pull that memory card out and a gust of wind comes up or something happens, like a buffalo or a bison just decides to charge you at the same second and you drop your memory card in a creek and it goes down the river. Like
Yeah.
there's things that like, as fail proof as it is, like we're only as fail proof as like we are. So that was my big thing. So people watching this, I say like, it might not fail, but you might.
Yeah.
So,
You just don't know. And for me, clients are paying me
oh
to
yeah, you, yeah,
produce an image, and I don't want to have to get back to my computer and it doesn't work. And so then I go and say, hey, I need to actually come back out and reshoot this. Obviously, I'm not going to charge you, but I have to come back out and reshoot this because my
that's a good
memory
point.
card failed. It's
Yeah,
not how I
that's a good
want to
point.
present myself to my clients. And so that's why my workhorse has 2 memory cards, and why, I'm going to wait to change to a different, daily camera,
Yeah, it
until
makes total
Canon has
sense.
a mirrorless that has 2 cards and is something that I'm comfortable making the purchase on.
Cool. And then we can talk about these things later too, but like, are you then shooting kind of raw on both cards, or how do
Doing
how do
RAW
you
with
do?
JPEG. So I'm doing RAW and JPEG in both cards because I use my iPad to take the shots, and I can
Okay.
talk about that whole setup and
Yeah,
everything.
Adam has a sick
And I
setup.
can
It's
talk
crazy.
about we can talk about tripods and bags and all that stuff in another episode, but I think it was good to kind of touch on here just
Yeah,
kind of the main gear and kind of some of the things around it. So whew,
flossing.
I think we talked about a lot. Did we miss anything?
Well, I mean, we have a couple little things here. Like when we came to pricing, I wanted to like, kind of almost going. Well, we had pricing, and then we also were gonna like I had mentioned if people are interested, because if they hit my website, if they hit your website, um, sponsors,
Mm-hmm.
and I get a lot of questions, and you have some sponsors and partners you work with, and then so I guess so yeah that how did you garner, or how did you acquire the companies that you work with? And because everybody's different,
Yeah.
there's the whole bits, but how did you get yours, and then why are sponsors important to you in your workflow?
Yeah. I think this is some good questions, and again, we can dive into that more, into sponsors and kind of how to get them, and what the impact is. But I would say, for me, I was trying to find brands where it was a partnership that made sense from a brand standpoint, basically. Um, is their gear something that I want to use on a regular basis? And is it something that I'm currently using? I think that's a big thing. Like most places that I've got my sponsors through was a gear that I was already using myself beforehand.
Right.
Um, I was a paying customer and I loved their stuff. And, you know, then,
You just
it
went
gets
from
to the
there.
point where you kind of reach out and say, hey, I love your stuff. I'm using it for X, Y, and Z. Would love to chat with you about, maybe how we could work together. It's something simple like
Yeah.
that. Some of the brands I've worked with, one of my main partners is Tiffin Company. They produce filters, tripods, lights, which is one of the lights here, that I'm using to light the Videocast on my end. And so it was one that made sense. I've been using their stuff for years, and fortunate to have been working with them now for a number of years. I've also done some work with some tripod companies, backpack companies, or bag companies, and it just it's stuff that, again, gear that I was already using. And
Hmm.
I have a large social media presence on my kind of travel account, and I think that probably did help with gaining some sponsors as well.
Okay. So ultimately it's like kind of the takeaway is, keep it organic.
Yeah,
And
that's a
and I
great way
think
to
that's the
describe
big
it.
thing really is like just really keep it organic. Like don't, I think there's a big difference between like somebody who's just genuinely using something and like, hey, you know what, I want to like
Hmm.
partner with you guys because at the end of the day, if I am already paying for your gear and I love it and I use it, people are going to recognize that. And then it's also going to help you in the future. Like it doesn't hurt to get gear floated to you and not have to pay for it,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
but you've already kind
I
of
mean,
paid
and
it
you
up
have some
front.
sponsors, and you've built those relationships up.
Yeah.
Again, you're using their products, and
Same
through
thing.
just building those relationships, the networking piece too.
It's the networking piece. Um, but it's also, it all starts from just being like, you know what, I love these boots because I hike with them all the time, or I love these filters because I shoot with them all the time, like you and Tiffin, and like me and Breakthrough. Um, And, you know, and so it just is one of these things. It's just ultimately an organic relationship. And that's like kind of like full stop
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
So
Have it be organic, and it's something that's probably going to take some time. So, you know, as you're kind of building yourself up, you know,
yeah, you'll know.
it's going to take some time, and, you know, it
Yeah.
may not happen either. And that's okay.
Yeah,
You gotta find stuff that works for you. So,
totally.
all right.
Oh,
I'm good with wrapping
man.
this up unless you got anything else.
I don't know, man. I think we could probably, I mean, it's only been about a half an hour. We could keep going for another half hour or two.
I'm sure that's just
No,
what our
I think
audience
that's
wants.
good. I think that's good. You
All
know,
right.
I think tonight's was a fun one. So
It was. I'm going to summarize real quick the points that we talked about, just from a business standpoint. So the first was really kind of, we talked about finding your niche a little bit, and how that's important, kind of what our photography journeys were, and how that is important to finding your niche and what you want to focus on as you move from maybe having photography be a hobby to full-time. We talked about networking to build your client base. Such a huge, important part of this. It's going to benefit you on so many different levels and so many different of these other points that we talked about from the business of photography. So network, be professional, be friendly, be fun, be someone that people want to work with at the end of the day. Let's see, website and your kind of your business branding, your personal branding. What does that look like? How do you want to present yourself to your clients in that way? So definitely something you need to take your time on. Insurance, business and equipment. We talked about that. Forms. What are those contracts, agreements, email templates, all those things. Pricing. How are you going to price yourself? Very important, especially on my end. From a day-to-day standpoint for you, especially like you said on prints and some of these other things, how do you price yourself so that way you're respectable and you're still able to generate the income that you need? And then gear. You don't always need the latest and greatest. Slowly build up that gear list from what you really need to get started in your specific area of photography to then, you know, what you really can have, to encompass everything that you want within your niche.
yeah, absolutely. And then if you ever have any questions on like how to handle any of this stuff, remember Night Court is a great resource for legal matters.
Is that even still on? Is that on still? Probably
Probably
not.
on TBS or something.
Probably on
TNT,
TBS, yeah.
TBS.
I don't have cable, so I wouldn't know any of these things. So
I grew up with Airwave TV and it was on it.
that's right, and little bunny antennas and stuff. So,
Oh,
all right.
I think that's it.
That's it.
I
Yeah.
mean,
So
yeah.
thanks for
All
tuning in,
right.
everybody. Again, we are on In Focus Videocast on YouTube. You can find us there. Please click subscribe. We're also on your favorite podcast platforms at In Focus Videocast. You can take us on the go if you don't want to see our faces on a weekly basis. You can listen to us banter there. Again, click subscribe. Tell your friends. We'd love to also hear from you. infocusvideocast@gmail.com. New episodes coming out every Friday. So get excited for lots of photography discussions and learning. We're going to really dive into some nitty-gritty stuff here in the next couple episodes, from scouting on the landscape side of things to using filters and lights in architectural photography. So stay tuned for all of that.
And even how you scout locations too, because
It's different.
It's different, but it's all relevant.
It is
No,
all
no, as I say, but it's different, but at the same time, it's probably in ways kind of similar. So this all will, you know, blend together. And yeah, and then like I was taking notes here, so I'll be sure that we add in, or Adam adds in the, you know, the authors, the photographers that we've discussed, or the author and the photographer we discussed tonight, the links, and so to check them out as well. So this was I like this one.
This one was
Not
fun.
that I didn't like the other ones, but this one's fun.
I enjoyed it. Hopefully our audience did. So again, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we will see you next week. Thanks, Joe.
Yep. Thanks, Adam. All right. See you, everyone.
See ya. Bye.